All right, everybody, we are back again for another episode of the Coach's Compass. Don't know what episode it is because we just continue to bring on cool guests and have them talk about everything across the board. It's your boy, Coach Coop. My boy, Coach Jay, couldn't be with us tonight because, again, he's still in that retirement tour phase, right? So he's still got to practice and play. Me, I'm just enjoying retirement. I get to work a little bit and I get to come on and talk to some really cool guests. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we continue to have this thing grow, continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. Now, today, another super important guest, right? We got Coach Nathan. Coach Nathan is the managing editor for the Simply Faster blog. He's also been here for 6 years and previously has worked for 1080 Motion and OmegaWave. Coach Nathan has also been coaching club soccer and travel softball for 10 years. Currently, he coaches 2 female soccer teams, 1 high school sophomore playing at a regional level, and a 1 HS freshman at a city level. The regional level team is a highly successful multi-sport team from a program I started at our club for multi-sport athletes. His most recent softball team of HS freshmen were also almost all multi-sport athletes. He was also a 2-sport high school athlete playing basketball and soccer. So, Coach Nathan, thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. It's going to be a good time.
So what first got you interested into going into, the coaching side and then also being a part of Simply Faster and kind of expanding how coaches are learning and athletes are getting more involved, and what brought you into that?
I got into the writing side of sports via the writing side. So earlier in my career, I was actually working as a journalist. I was working in music journalism, and it's not the most highly paid way to try to earn a living, and it's a lot of hustle. And via my writing ability, got hired for OmegaWave to start standing up their blog and begin interviewing coaches and begin doing profiles that way. And that just kind of naturally progressed into the role that I had at Simply Faster. And because I had an athletic background and because I understood sports, it was easy to kind of marry my professional writing background with my sports background. And then the coaching side kicked in initially because I had kids who started playing sports. And so my first coaching experiences were actually coaching their youth teams when they were 6, 7, 8 years old. And then that evolved into a professional coaching role where now I coach teams that my kids are not on.
What was it like though? Because coaching your kids sometimes can be a little tricky, right? Because it's always that point of like, all right, you're dad, but then you become coach when you step out there on the field. How was it? Because I know for myself, I'm new to the dad world. I'm new to the fatherhood thing. What was it like, having to wear those 2 hats? When did you kind of learn to kind of take one hat off and be coach and with the other hat off and be dad? And then also combat like, parents saying or kids saying that, oh, they're only getting playing time because they're the son or they're the child of the coach.
Right. That's always a tough one. And the simple answer to that is on the field, the dad hat never gets put on. One of my favorite stories is that I actually was coaching one of my daughter's teams when she was 14 years old. And after a game, she got into the front seat of the car with me, drove away, and one of the other parents whose daughter had only been on the team for 5 or 6 months was driving behind us and was absolutely aghast. Like, what on earth is going on? Why is this girl riding home with the head coach? And she'd been on the team for 6 months and had no idea that one of the players was my daughter, and her daughter didn't know it either. Not because it was a big secret, but just like that's I treat my kids on those teams as if they were any other player, and they called me coach, and that's the way that worked. And then functionally speaking, if that part about playing time and daddy ball and all those things, if you operate under the meritocracy of sport and you are clearly trying to put players in a position to succeed who've earned that right to succeed while also giving opportunities to everybody on the team because that's what they're there for, and you're trying to build everybody up together. If you're doing that, the playing time questions should answer themselves. And if you're not ever putting your children in a position that they don't earn, then those questions don't come up. And it's usually those things happen when all of a sudden somebody decides, oh, there's this situation, I want to have my son or daughter be the one to take the penalty kick, or I want to have my son or daughter pitch this game, or whatever it is. And maybe that's not the right choice. Those are the things that really get coaches into that kind of discussion with the parents on their team.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tough one to walk on because, I mean, yeah, because you can get home and then there's a little bit upset that, hey, dad, like, why didn't you play me that much? Or, hey, dad, why were you tough? Like, they sometimes feel that, why were you tougher on me than you were on the other kids? But also, how did you get your kids to also get into being multi-sport athletes? And then what is the importance of these athletes being multi-sport athletes? Because if you look at nowadays, right, you've got a lot of kids and a lot of parents that are saying they're specialized, right, in just one sport, right? Like you got the
Mm-hmm.
baseball players, the basketball players, the football, the soccer. And it's like from 7 or 8 years old, you got these kids saying they're already specialized in one thing. And you're like, how do you become a better athlete? So that's my question to you. Like,
Right.
how did you embrace being a multi-sport athlete, and how are you pushing it to your athletes that being a multi-sport athlete is very important?
So I was a multi-sport athlete, and so that like part of my childhood was something that I wanted to replicate for kids in the community here in San Diego. And when I was in middle school, I was on the baseball team, the basketball team, the flag football team, the soccer team, and the wrestling team. And importantly, in middle school, if you had said, what sports are you going to play in high school? I would have said baseball. I love baseball. I'm all in on baseball, my favorite sport. You said, well, if you can't play baseball, what are you going to play? Well, then I'll play football. Those were the two. Then, as I got to my freshman year of high school, well, my vision wasn't perfect. I couldn't hit a curveball. I really struggled at baseball. I wasn't going to grow into the size to be a particularly good football player. I was, tall and lean and had trouble keeping weight on. And the sports that I ended up going to were more natural for my interests and my body type. And I ended up being a varsity soccer player and basketball player. And if I'd had to choose at an earlier time in my life, I would have chosen poorly. I would have been in sports that I wasn't going to succeed in, and I would have washed out at an earlier age had I specialized. So that's like part of the mindset is you just don't know. Like if you put your kid into volleyball when they're 6 and say you're going to be a volleyball player, well, they may not grow to be that volleyball player. They may not grow to be that basketball player. So that's putting a lot of eggs in a basket that may not turn out right. And then another very important thing from my own background is that when one season resolved, I was usually super excited for the next one to start. And variety in training, you realize, like anybody who trains athletes knows that, if you can do the same thing for 6-8 weeks at a time, and then you got to switch some things up, or else things get routine, intent gets low, effort gets less focused, and even more so when you're dealing with 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. So the ability to go from one sport to another, where there's a new movement challenge, there's a new tactical challenge, there's maybe new players on the team, there's all these new fresh things, is super, super valuable. And then just from the movement literacy part, if you take an 8-year-old child and put them on a soccer field and say, hey, you're just going to be a soccer player, at 8 years old, almost everything in soccer is moving forward and on the ground. So they're doing everything in this specific movement pattern. There's nothing overhead. There's nothing over their shoulders. They're not backpedaling. And you can look at, a Premier League game and say, oh, well, they're moving in 360 degrees. That's part of the sport. Well, it's not part of the sport when they're 8. So if you want somebody to have that kind of movement literacy, you need to hit them fly balls. You need to challenge them to get off the ground to get a rebound. You need to have them pick up a stick and see something small and see if they can do with a small ball what they might need to do with a larger ball, and all of the different implements, and then different game types of strategies where, something like baseball and softball is all about making the right decisions. When do I sacrifice a run to try to get an out? When do I get the out? And, those kinds of decisions, and those come up in minute times in the run of play in a normal sport, where if your a shortstop and you understand, hey, I'm going for the double play and I'm going to let the run go in, it's not that dissimilar from being a center midfielder in a soccer game and realize, hey, I'm going to close down this ball because I'm not going to get beat behind me on this in this situation. And so it's just all of those snap decisions that you have to make tactically, and they build up that mindset that just makes them a more durable and more resilient athlete in total.
I mean, it makes sense to you and I because both multi-sport athletes. I did, basketball, baseball, track, football, right, all through middle school. And when I got to high school, did basketball, football, track, and then college I did football and track, and I became a professional athlete. How hard is it though to get parents to understand that, right? That you should put your athletes in multiple sports and not so much worry about the Division I scholarship at 7, 8 years old. Like, we don't even know if this kid is going to grow to have that potential to get there. But like, you'll help even if they get to high school level, you'll help their recruiting process if they are multi-sport athletes.
Right. So there's two things that you have to battle as a coach in terms of multiple sports. And one is the D1 or bust mindset of parents who don't really understand the process and maybe have not looked at their husband or wife directly and said, wait, I'm 5'9", you're 5'10". We're probably not going to have a D1 basketball daughter, even though right now she's running, circles around people on the basketball court. It's probably not going to happen. Two is that the schedules of youth sports are entirely incompatible with the multi-sport mindset, because youth sports organizations don't have the luxury of just going dark for 6-9 months of the year while you go do something else, because it's people's livelihoods. Like a club of any sport, whether you're talking about a volleyball club or a soccer club or a travel baseball team or whatever it is, if it's somebody's living to make the team function and make the sport function, they have to try to make that living 12 months out of the year at least, or something close to it. And so sports schedules are year round, which then, well, how do you play multiple sports when my soccer team never stops playing, my volleyball team never stops playing, my lacrosse team never stops playing? And so that was the thing that with my kids that I did was I want them to be multiple sport athletes, and there's not a system here in our community that permits that. So I created it. All right, here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these kids who look like they want to play multiple sports, and I'm going to give you this highly competitive soccer team. Come play on this team, and during your spring volleyball, softball, or lacrosse season, we're not going to play any games that matter. So, hey, maybe, we'll meet 6 times a month and we'll get out and train. And if a third of you show up, there's going to be no game conflicts on a March or April weekend. Go play your other sport. Then when it's time to play soccer again, come back and be all in on soccer, and giving that seasonality, which is really the key to multiple sports. Because if you're trying to play 2 high-level competitive club sports simultaneously, it's just a recipe for exhaustion and a recipe for frustrated, like, hey, you end up basically trying to split the baby in 2, and you do 2 things at a lower level than you could do any one thing. So really managing the schedule with the multiple sports teams was the magic behind it. And then having the right players with the right mindset who wanted to buy in on that. And then the fact that they were very athletic helped the seasons be rewarding. So like, hey, we can still be very successful because we're good athletes, and we don't necessarily need to focus on one sport 12 months out of the year, because when we show up and start focusing on soccer, it's not that they've been playing video games for the last 4 months. They've been doing something else at a high level, and so they're ready to click right in.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense, and it's awesome that you were able to create this level of high performing athletes, like at a club level, and then also allow them to be able to play other sports on top of it, because obviously your background of playing multiple sports. But you also talked earlier on about getting into journalism, right? Being a good writer with sports and stuff. and then working for companies like 1080 Motion and OmegaWave, and then that's what got you into Simply Faster. Now, when you're talking to coaches out there that you're writing these blogs for and that have used these the 1080 and OmegaWave, how have you seen that help their coaching careers in what they're doing, like using these new technologies and stuff to make their athletes better athletes? Like, what are some of the things that some of the coaches out there are telling you? And also, if you've had the opportunity to use them with working with your athletes, what are some of the benefits of it?
So when it comes to sports technologies, the biggest thing for any coach is first understand what it's providing you, and not just getting like a stream of data and then, okay, well, now I have to do something. Like, you have to really, most coaches who are really effective with, whether it's something like OmegaWave, where you're getting central nervous system data and HRV data and readiness data. Well, 2 weeks of readiness data don't tell you anything. You need to like collect 3-4 months of data and understand the trends and the patterns before you can actually then make an intervention. And something like 1080 motion, if you're using resisted or assisted sprint techniques, you have to understand, all right, what's the impact of using these over time, so that you then know how to prescribe them over time. So with any kind of technology, the key is to really, before you start making decisions based upon it, you have to collect enough data so that you're actually supporting the decisions that you want to make, and it's helping you do the things that you want it to help you do. So technology should help you solve a problem, not necessarily create more problems for you, not create new workflows for you, not create new like technical issues for you. So if you think, hey, I have athletes who are struggling in early acceleration, and the 1080 motion might be the thing to help us get over that hump with those athletes, then all right, now you have a problem that you're looking to solve. Now you can start testing it with it to see, all right, what types of resistance are working with my athletes, which different athletes does this function well with. Are they a little bit more muscle based and they're grinding through that early acceleration? All right, this is going to help them in a certain way. Are they a little bit more elastic and a little bit more tendon based? All right, maybe this isn't helping them and I need to back off on that. And then with many of the technologies that we have in Simply Faster, there are two different ways that they really function for coaches using them. And whether it's a jump mat or a timing gate or even something like the 1080 motion, first and foremost, that new stimulus drives intent in the session itself. So with like my softball teams, if I have my players throw from third base to first base, they're going to throw from third base to first base. And, they'll do it at a pretty routine level. If I bring out the pocket radar and put it behind them and tell them what the miles per hour on their throw from third base to first base, they don't suddenly learn in that moment to throw harder, but everybody's suddenly throwing 3-4 miles an hour faster because they're getting that immediate live feedback. And with that increase in intent, that may nudge their actual ability to throw a little bit harder, a little bit more accurate, and with a little bit more focus. And so just like that immediate, not me saying, I think you can throw harder, me saying 48 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, wait, I want to be in the 50s like my teammates, then that intent changes. And it's the same thing when I break out the free lap cones. We could say, all right, we're going to run sprints and we're going to race, and they run a lot of sprints and they run a lot of races. And oh, well, hey, now we're timing your miles an hour and we're calling out your miles an hour. Oh, it's go time. Like, everybody's intent suddenly really kicks in. And that is the same thing that people see with jump mats and they see with force plates and whatever. Where there's live feedback, there is intent. And then obviously the other thing that you get with your technology is the ability to track developments over time. So I can then say, hey, instead of, I think you're throwing a little bit faster from third base to first base, hey, here's where you were when I clocked you 6 months ago, and here's where you are now. I know the exact numbers. Or here's what your mile per hour was at the beginning of the season when we were running 10-yard flies from a 30-yard build-in. Here's what your mile per hour is now. We're improving. Or maybe it's going down, and then you can say, you know what? we're losing speed. Is it because you're doing too much and you're fatigued, or is it because you're doing not enough and you're losing that speed training? So you have that ability, and then within every single coach's practice, there's how much ability they have to actually work off of the data. And for some coaches who have their athletes in a contained situation, they've got them every day over time, then they can make a whole lot of decisions based upon their data, and they can make a lot of training decisions based upon what the technology is providing them. And for coaches who, like myself, I have my players 90 minutes twice a week. There's only so many things that I would really manipulate in my training design based on the data I collect. So what I usually do use technology for, it's more driving intent and a little bit of accountability, but it's not so much, oh, hey, we're really tracking trends over time, because there's just too many other inputs. And again, and especially with multi-sport athletes, they're doing so many different things that I'm not in control of, that if I think, well, I can control this because I've got some data, well, maybe they played 5 lacrosse games over the weekend and my data is irrelevant now. Or maybe they, had a highly stressful club volleyball tournament and they flew back and forth across the country, and now I have them on Monday at soccer practice and my data is irrelevant. So it's all individual to the coach's practice and how they apply it.
Yeah, because I mean that's a very controversial topic. If you talk about the old school coaches compared to like the newer age coaches, like working with technology, and that's a question I would have for you is how much have you seen technology actually hinder or hurt the way coaches coach? Because so many people, if you talk to the old school coaches, they're like, well, all I need is a stopwatch and the coach's eye. Now these newer coaches are like, well, we video everything, you record times and all this stuff, and then sometimes it comes into like hindering the time of how much you spend actually training instead of watching the video and trying to look at data. So how has is technology actually helping the training field, or is it kind of slowing it down? Like, are we doing is technology really the right way to go, or is it still we got to depend on the coach's eye?
You still have to depend on the coach's eye. So technology can't help you do anything that you can't already do. Again, it should be like you're recognizing some things that you would like to do better, and hopefully it helps you do those things better. But if you can't already do it at a baseline level, there's no technology that's going to suddenly like hack your way to being better at the thing that you're not already good at. For older people who are old school in anything new that they're not good with, they don't like. I mean, it does, like, that's why there's cliches about why your grandparents don't like the remote control on a television. It's because I can't figure this thing out. And as a coach, I can speak for the fact that there is nothing more frustrating in a training session than getting there, setting up like some kind of timing gates or whatever it is, and we're going to do this session and everything's set, and all of a sudden there's an app failure, or like the gates aren't syncing, or whatever that may be, and you've got 20 kids warmed up looking at you and you look like an idiot because there's not enough wireless connectivity out on the field that you're at. And as a coach, you don't like to look like an idiot. And so now you're like, ugh. And so you get into those moments where, like, you know what, my stopwatch never made me look like that, and I'm just going to trust my stopwatch. And so, the solution to that is, again, to be really comfortable with the things you're using before you use them. Be comfortable using them on yourself before you bring them to 4 players. Be comfortable with using them with 4 players before you bring them to 12 players. Be comfortable with 12 players before you bring it to 25. And like having that facility with it so that you can troubleshoot it a little bit on your own, so that your athletes are used to you using it in smaller group sessions, so that the time that maybe you do have an issue, it's not, oh my gosh, there's 50 kids who've never seen me use this thing before and now they're all looking at me. It's, well, hey, most of them have used it, they know it works, and they understand that sometimes wireless issues happen. So I mean, that part of it is definitely real. And then when it comes to our coaches spending too much time looking into video, focusing on data, it's time is always limited. you only have so many hours of the day. You only have so much time with your athletes. You can only prescribe so many different exercises with them. And so it's all about how you manage the time that you have and if you're getting value out of your time. And if you're spending 3 hours uploading CSV files and looking at data and focusing all this stuff, and that's exhausting you to the point that you haven't actually had conversations with the athlete about their nutrition, what their goals are, and some of the simple human sides of things, then you haven't actually used your time very wisely. And it may feel like, well, I'm coaching at this incredibly high level because I have all of these data inputs and I've got all of this video and all of this stuff. And meanwhile, your athletes had a breakup and you don't even know, or parents got divorced and you don't even know, like they're having trouble getting to the field and some of those kinds of basic things. So for younger coaches, the key I would say is again, if you're fluent with it, awesome. If it's a good value for your time, continue to use it. And again, the art of coaching is always the art of coaching, and it's about the relationships you create with the players. It's not what you know, it's what you can get them to do. And so you can have everything up in your brain and be as smart about it as you think you are. But if you cannot translate that into behavioral changes by your players, then it's irrelevant.
I mean, Coach, you say a lot of great things, but do you ever get imposter syndrome being in this field, in this area? Like, do you ever just question, like, hey, am I doing things correctly, or am I giving like was that workout like the actual great best workout for my athletes at that time? Because I mean, yeah, like younger coaches getting into it's tough. Like even like a retired athlete myself, like I've been through a lot of workouts and I've studied a lot of things, but you question like, hey, is this field for me? Like, am I doing everything to my capability? Do you ever have that feeling?
So there's when you've been coaching for a while and you've seen a lot of different circumstances, you get a comfort level where you feel like, all right, look, I could roll up to the field and just about anything could happen, and I'll be able to get an effective training session in. Like, it could suddenly go from raining to 95 degrees. We'll figure it out. I could go from thinking I've got 18 players showing up to 5. I can figure it out. Whatever the case may be, you get that certain degree of comfort with, I know what I'm doing. I'm able to communicate with my players, and I'm able to turn most situations into something that we can get something positive because we're goal oriented and we know how to try to pursue our goals one way or another. Now, within that, everybody has a session or even a week or a game that's a total bomb. Like, I'll have things where I'll think, hey, this is going to be awesome. Like, I've got these games set up and we're going to do this like kind of lively warm up, and then it's going to transition into this small sided game where I'm putting in some constraints that are going to get this very specific outcome that I want to create, and it's going to like teach the kids this thing, and at the end of it, it's been a total bust. Like, the kids didn't enjoy it. They didn't get the outcome that I wanted. Like, the topic was barely touched on. Things that I wanted to create within the session did not occur. And then you have those moments like, did I blow that because there's somebody else who, if they stepped in, would have had a level of expertise that would have done that better? And in those moments, I think the bottom line is you realize that just about everybody, like regardless of their level of coaching experience, is going to have those dud days, and they're going to have those sessions that are a bust, and they're going to have those games where they made the wrong decisions and their wrong decisions led to negative outcomes. And if you're not questioning yourself, you're doing things at a level that's so unambitious that you're not challenging yourself. So, I mean, if you're trying to grow and if you're putting yourself in challenging situations and you're having a certain amount of ambition in your career and in your sport, you should have those questioning moments where you think, would somebody else be doing this better? And that's kind of where the imposter syndrome comes in, is that, well, is there this other level of people who are doing this better? And then in those moments, you have to, all right, well, if there was somebody who might be able to do this better than I could have, what would they be doing? And then hopefully the outcome of that is something productive. Oh, well, maybe I didn't think this through. Maybe I didn't plan this well enough. Maybe there's something I could have done differently. And hopefully that reflective process ultimately produces a good.
It's good to hear that, some of the coaches that have been in the game for like years that you have been in are also still feeling what we feel like when we're at this young age of like, hey, like, or did that session go as I planned, or what should I look back at and who should I be learning from? Knowing what you know now, though, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
Oh man, my 16-year-old self was not a smart 16-year-old. I mean, I was your typical like 16-year-old who wanted to go and hang out and have fun, and uh, I was not that driven. So it would the amount of things that I would need to teach my 16-year-old self is massive, and it was probably a 20-year process between 16 and 35 of like making mistakes, learning from mistakes, making mistakes, learning from mistakes, making mistakes, learning from mistakes, until I kind of had a pretty good understanding of, all right, these are the foundations of who I'm going to be. Here's the foundations of what are going to be like the life that I want to live and the career that I want to have and the way that I want to raise my kids and the role that I want to have in my community. And the role that I have in my community today is not a role that I could have had in my community at 25 when I was trying to be a writer and up all night and doing all kinds of different sorts of things that 25-year-olds can do. So the challenge then is, when it comes to like providing advice to your younger self, is your younger self is what got you to where you are. And all of those experiences are part of who I am now. And I had to live through all of those experiences to be the person that I am now. So if you change everything, then maybe you don't get to where you are. And if you're content with the things that you're doing, and I don't want to say that I'm content like settling, but if you think you're doing things in a way that you are generally proud of, and that you think, all right, each day that I go out and live, I'm doing things the right way, then your experiences are what got you.
Yeah. Why change the things that have so you those things to get to this point? But Coach Nate, before we get out of here, we got our last segment of the game. Right? It's our 60-second round. It's 10 questions, one-word answers all across the board. Are you ready for it? All right, here we go. 60 seconds on the clock. Favorite post-workout snack?
Trail mix.
Favorite sport? Dream vacation spot?
Hawaii.
Guilty pleasure food?
Ice cream.
Best concert you've ever been to?
Public Enemy.
Favorite movie genre?
Action.
Best gym you've ever been to?
The gym at UC Santa Barbara.
Dream car?
An old convertible.
What is your number one flaw as a coach?
Having a day job complex.
Would you rather be in an octagon with a gorilla, tiger, or a bear?
Gorilla.
And that is it. Thank you, Coach Nate. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for coming on and talking so much, just real talk about what is going on in the coaching scene and how multi-sport athletes work and everything across the board. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being on today.
Absolutely. Hopefully people get something of value out of the conversation.
For sure. And we're out of here.